Hi, I'm Paul Catalanato, and this is my friend and colleague Hamp Overton. This is the 100 Scariest, where we are looking for the scariest short streaming online. In this episode, we're talking about 2015's Night of the Slasher, directed by Shant Hamassian. I came across this one through an ad on Facebook a decade ago. Night of a Slasher is an Oscar-qualified one-take horror short that was shown at the South by Southwest 2016 Film Festival, among a few others. Also, it was a 2016 iHorror nominee and 2018 entry into Screamfest. This film was also a Vimeo staff pick and was mentioned on Forbes. Brian Leake said, impressively shot in one continuous take. Slasher is a clever piece of work. The film was in 200 festivals and earned an impressive 60 award wins. 2 years Alter added the movie to their collection. The movie stars Lily Berlina, Scott Javor, and Aim Lesser. And I hope I'm not butchering these names, which I am. If I am, please correct me with phonetic spelling in the comments below, and I will apologize. With Lily handling the lion's share of this seemingly one-take movie, the IMDb logline reads, a teenage girl must commit horror movie sins such as drink, do drugs, and have sex to lure a killer and finish him off. So, Ham, Night of the Slasher. I have to say that this one stuck with me, literally, and it's not how it's shot, but how it turns the cliches on their head. What did you think?
I enjoyed the film. How did it turn the cliches on its head, Paul? That's an interesting way of putting it. How so? I don't mean to throw these questions right back at you,
How
but
did cliches turn on their head? What's that?
I feel like I've just turned it right back on you after after you asked me a question. I threw it back at you. So.
Well, I just think that's one of those things like you do to pretend to be smart. So you rephrase everything. It just turn it right back to
Well,
the
you,
other
you know what
person.
it probably also is,
That's the
Paul.
professor thing. When you don't have that answer
Exactly.
right away, you can buy yourself like 5 minutes.
Well,
Well, what did you
it's
think were the cliches?
it's also what we do to have the students answer the question rather than us just give them the answers, you know. That's a very Aristotelical Aristotelical. That's a very Aristotic thing to do in that you make the student answer their own questions. And so anyway, I'm sure a lot of professors do that and adapt and adopt that premise so that you could get someone else to engage and think about the answer rather than just giving it to them. So Paul, let me ask you.
There are dozens of viewers right now who are like, I hate it when my professor does that. Well, anyway, it turns it
Exactly.
on its head, in my opinion, how it acknowledges the cliches, right? Don't drink, don't smoke, highly sexualized, all these things will attract the killer. Turns it on its head in that the victim is wanting to break these rules, these cliches, to attract the killer. So it's almost like it's given a reason for this stuff to that it's in our culture, right? Or that these movies
Right.
have these rules, right? That were established way back in Halloween. It's like it has to be that way to attract the killer. So it's almost like it's taking what is worn out, making it new again by like giving it a reason behind it, a reason or
Yeah.
motivation behind the rules and cliches.
Right. If you look at um, read his interview on Vimeo, he specifically says that the story is about self-destruction. To quote him, he says, "The woman is traumatized, so she self-destructs. The horror sins are her coping mechanisms." So his interpretation, or what was hoping to do, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but is that this woman has been attacked once, and we see that with the slash on her throat. And now she's inviting the killer back again as a means to cope with this. And it's a pretty serious and heavy uh, concept or theme that he's putting out there. And I was surprised when I read it because when I watched the movie, I thought it was very light and humorous and comical and was playing with the genre itself. And to see this thing buried underneath it that he was hoping to convey or it inspired him kind of took me by surprise. Uh, what do you, how about you, Paul? Were you thinking that that this movie had so much seriousness behind it?
I agree with you. No, when I first watched this, and I didn't really pick that up until probably reading the article just like you did. To me, it was like I took it for face value, which shame on me, I guess, but shame on both of us. The thing is like I took it for okay, this is somebody who really enjoys horror films. This is somebody who has watched a lot of these and thought of a very clever way to spin it on their head. But look, you and I have taught screenwriting before. You and I both know that subtext, even if your viewer's not picking it up, it is appreciated. And I think that's one of the things that does make it a stronger piece is that it is there. It might not be the easiest thing for us to pick out, but it's there just enough for us to appreciate it.
Yeah. And I think it's important to remember that any writer or any director can only make the film they want to, but ultimately the viewer sees the film that they see, and it may be different than what the director intended. But directors understand this that they've made something, but in any artist, whether you're a painter or a novelist or anything like that, once you put it out into the public can interpret it however they want. And you don't have much control or say over that. So I thought it was interesting that both you and I came away with a much different interpretation of it than what his intentions were. Again, I want to point out that I don't think that's good or bad. It just is one of those things as a filmmaker you need to be aware of.
I appreciated the film more because of what he said. Because now once he said it, I did see it. Does that make sense? Like I
Sure,
saw it
absolutely.
after he brought it up.
Right. When I watched the film, my first question was, wait, why is her throat cut already? I didn't understand that. To me, her throat would be cut at the end of the film, right? And
Mhm.
so, but then you start to get some ideas. Oh, she's actually got a notepad there with the things she needs to do. But as you could see from the notepad, at the end of the film, that was the first time she did that. So, she flips the notepad over and it's the second time. And so I did kind of scratch my head again and say, well, if this is the first time she did it, when did she get her throat cut? And so I couldn't really follow his logic, but after reading the article, I think I could understand the film better.
This is one of those cases is where this is a feature-length idea compressed down into a short movie. He
Hmm.
took the very first 10 minutes of his movie and he made the short film. I mean, I definitely will say I didn't need all that to enjoy it or appreciate it.
Right.
And I think that's why this movie won the awards that it did. It's not necessary. You can tell that there's more going on than what you're seeing, but I don't think it's needed to really appreciate the movie. And I think that's the mark of a pretty solid film, right?
Yeah, I think you touched on something very important about subtext and secondary meaning. Most feature films have that where there's obviously you have a theme in there, and sometimes when you make a short, you can cut those corners and say, I'm just going to go to, because this is a comedy as well as a horror film, and you could say, oh well, I'll just make it fun and have made make the tropes of the genre, that type of thing. But he went beyond that, and he clearly had a deeper meaning with what he was doing. And when you do that, like you mentioned, on further viewings, or maybe even for some people on their first, you can see that there's more to it. It creates gravitas in a film, and it's not just something you forget the next day. And so whether that was accomplished here or not, for everyone, every viewer, I'm not sure, but it is fun to read and see that he did put more into this than we took at first blush, I should say.
And I think that's one of the things that makes him a solid filmmaker. You can look at this and see that he has a very original voice. I'd like to see more from this filmmaker.
Yeah, I was kind of frustrated that I could only find one other short he did, which was a horror short also. Um, I guess
I
that
did
would you
like
call
that
it? Yeah,
short.
was that horror? I guess you'd call that horror. Yeah.
Yeah, it was funny. What was the name of it?
It's called A Really Nice Guy.
So yeah, his short, The Really Nice Guy was solid. It was a good one joke horror
Hmm.
film. It's because like the actor does a really good job of setting you up to believe this is a guy who's not who's just having bad luck with the ladies, and it kind of
Right.
flips that completely on its head.
He does.
But back to Night of the Slasher. So I know it's not truly one take. It has a lot of clever cuts. If you know where to look for them, they're there.
Sure.
A lot of them are done in the pans. How do you think they did with those pans? I believed it.
Yeah, I think they did a great job. I mean, one of the easiest things to do is to hide a, I shouldn't say the easiest things. It's hard to shoot a one taker, okay? Because it takes coordination, not just with the actors, it takes coordination with the camera operator too. So, like if you had a dolly, that means the dolly operator has to be in sync, the camera operator has to be in sync, the actors have to be in sync. All these types of things all have to be choreographed, which is why you need to rehearse these things so much. I was thinking of movies like 1917, which was gave the illusion of one take also, and Birdman, which also gave the illusion that it was one take. And they would hide things in, if an actor passes in front of the camera closely, that can be a cut right there. If the camera, you saw that sometimes the camera would go a different path than what the actor did. So the actor went this way and the camera went this way, and that can be a place for a cut also. That just makes it a little bit easier to shoot the whole thing rather than go, this is what you mentioned it already. Okay, this movie is 11 minutes long, and if you go 9 minutes in and you screw up, it's you gotta go and start the whole thing all over again. If you have these little passes, then you can break it down to smaller chunks, which makes it more doable. That's not to say that there aren't some movies out there that have done it completely in one take, but that's very, very challenging to do.
And it's one of the things that makes this movie just fly by. 11 minutes, it breezes right on by.
It does. And that to me, that's the pinnacle of a great film is when you don't even notice that oh, it's over with already. That means you're fully engaged in the film, which is great. Any movie that you find yourself looking at your cell phone, what time is it, that type of thing, or getting distracted by things, that's an issue because we're such the audience that has now been saturated with Instagram and TikTok, and it's got to be done in 15 seconds rather than even a minute or something like that. A film has to be really, really good to keep our attention for a longer period of time. And not like 10 minutes is a really long period of time, but it still needs to be a good film in order to keep our attention.
Absolutely. And I mean, this movie really does succeed in that. I find it funny that we watched Pumpkin Guts last week and now we watch this movie this week. You know, I guess we're just magnets for 80s aesthetic horror, huh? This
I made
movie
it.
wears its love of the 80s on its sleeve just like the previous movie did.
Yeah, I made a note of that also. And back in the 80s, I remember a friend pointed out the morality plays of all those 80s movies. He said, have you ever noticed that the one woman that survives in like Friday the 13th and Halloween is always the woman that doesn't sleep around, she doesn't booze, she doesn't party, all that kind of stuff. She's the one that survives. And so and then this movie comes along and of course she's trying to attract the killer. So what does she do? She sleeps around, she smokes, she does booze, all that kind of stuff. And so anyway, it was an interesting thing that a lot of your horror movies in the 80s had that sort of theme to it. Do you think that's still relevant today with contemporary horror movies?
That's an interesting comment. It does seem like the rules are in play, but we don't see as many slasher movies as we used to. But you
Hmm.
think about Happy Death Day, you think of Cabin in the Woods. It seems like right now we're very much trying to flip the genre on its head, much like this movie.
Hmm.
So like this movie really does come in a time. I mean, it's 10 years ago, but it still seems like when concerning the slasher, we're still very much like playing with the rules that have been established in the 80s.
The
That Carpenter.
morality rules, right? You can
Yeah,
probably even go back a little bit further. Yeah, because I was thinking movies, newer horror films like Hereditary, his types of movies where they don't follow that usual uh, plot. What's the words I'm looking for? They don't usually follow that. I don't want to say ethical. It's not an ethical thing. It's what's the words I'm looking for, Paul, here?
No, it's more like a drama when you watch Hereditary. It follows with like it's almost like character resolutions.
Right, right. But what I'm getting is the ethics of the film are different than the ethics of a film shot in the 80s, where,
Oh, I see.
you know, if your character, the characters that are doomed are the ones that are unethical, the ones that have questionable morality. Hereditary, there's nothing wrong with the people that end up getting killed and attacked and stuff like that. They're good people. And some of these other films that the same director has made, you know, it's a different approach to it. And not that they didn't exist, because I'm thinking like the movies like The Omen and back in the 80s and things like that, where that movie didn't specifically pick on people that were going to be you know, unethical. But your teen slasher, which this is a teen slasher, they almost always seem to follow that sort of pattern.
I'm just trying to think, like, I'm kind of stumped trying to think of a recent slasher. The only two I can think of are like the Happy Death Day series that comes off the top of my head, or
Hmm.
in the Scream series, you know,
Did you
and
see
that's
Megan
back
or any of those other ones? How about Megan?
Megan. I mean, I don't know if I would consider Megan a slasher considering it's AI.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about horror movies in general.
With
Uh,
ethics, well, I mean, you know the old saying, if it's you cause your own tragedy, but if you didn't deserve it, it's a horror movie, you know? And
I
that's
see.
kind of
Tragedy versus a horror. Yeah.
yeah, so like when you think about these characters in a slasher movie, Laurie in Halloween is more tragic than she would be than it would be a horror, but everybody else it would be a horror that's surrounding them, right? And
Hmm.
if you think about a movie like Hereditary, that's horror, you know? I mean, that's something you didn't deserve, but it happened to you.
So it's tragedy also, is what you're saying.
Well, tragedy in romantic sense would be like you earned it, right? Like, the like Oedipus Rex, right? He continues to look and look and look, and then he finds out what he wants, but he doesn't want it when he finds it. He causes
Mm,
his own destruction.
gotcha. Gotcha. Okay, that's interesting. Never had it defined that way. Yeah. So,
That's how I've always understood tragedy. I'm thinking actually back to my old Steve Hank classes too, because he really loved tragic
mhm,
movies. And that was one of the things he used to beat down on us is like, and typically in tragedy, the characters are
Ernie.
instrumental in their own fall. You think
Yep.
about a movie like Angel Heart,
Hmm.
the one with Mickey Rourke.
Make your work. Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, so like, the devil sends him to find himself.
Right. Yeah.
And it becomes tragic because he finds himself,
Mm.
literally and figuratively. I will say this though. This movie, Night of Slasher, was hilarious and scary in places. It was really hilarious when the other guy was there. They had like three good jokes back to back. When she's drinking the beers, that was really well done and hilarious. I know
Hmm.
I read in the articles they said she was spitting it up at the same time because she couldn't keep it all down.
Yeah.
That was that was good when the guy goes, I have friends in AA if you want to talk to them.
Right.
But that was a good one. It was a good turn. And then when she brought him to the couch and he says,
Hmm.
nobody wants to talk, nobody wants to date me because I look like I'm 30 years old. Like that is
Right.
like
Right.
so on the nose, but great. Like that
Hmm.
was one of the best comments in the whole movie.
It was very funny that they included that. Hmm. What I had some notes here about the appeal of doing a single shot film or the illusions of a single shot film. Why do you think filmmakers want to do that? You know, as we mentioned, a lot of feature length films have done that also. What is the gain by doing that, by making it more challenging for yourself? Because when you do that, you are now so reliant upon, because you can't improve a scene with editing. You know, editing is such a great tool to fix bad performances or fix a slow scene or parts that aren't working because they're dragging. You can shorten a scene, or if the scene moves too quickly, you can lengthen the scene. I mean, editing is such a powerful tool, and when a director chooses to eliminate that tool, they now have to get it right on the set. What's the gain? Because you lose so much is my question. I mean, you lose so much when you remove the ability to edit and post as a filmmaker. What's the gain here?
So to me, when he puts this movie in a one take, this is somebody who's saying, I'm ready to work, I'm ready to make movies. This is what I bring. I can put it all out there
Hmm.
and accomplish it. That's what I think he's saying as a filmmaker. I think the movie's saying with the Wonder is that it does two things to me. One, it makes it more exciting because we're in that moment with her.
Right.
There's no there's no getting away from it. We're in the danger with her. And number two, it makes his gag work. And the gag, of course, is that the killer is disappearing and reappearing. To me, was one of the things I really enjoyed about the movie, but also distracted me a little bit because I kept trying to think, is this in her head or is this not? But reading his interviews, it seems to be that the killer is a real thing in itself. So I'm left to believe that the killer had its own supernatural powers where it could disappear and reappear, like like Jason could in the 80s, and he was commenting on that, how the killer
Hmm.
could reappear and disappear. But because he did it in a oneer, it was a lot more noticeable and it was a lot more effective because where did he go? Like literally, he was disappearing in the cuts
Hmm.
or in the
Hmm.
pans.
Yeah, I
And
think
that
you
why he did it. That's my opinion anyway.
gotcha. Yeah, I think you brought up some good points. Yes, filmmakers like to, I think filmmakers, rather than maybe showing off, they like to challenge themselves. It's, yeah, I could get this covered with lots of takes and then have the editor help me put it together. But if I did it, the movie Rope was mentioned in that article and Hitchcock's Rope. And the reason what Hitchcock did is basically he shot every scene as a the length of a roll of 35 millimeter film, which was like about 10 minutes long. Okay. And so all the cuts would be at the end of each roll. And the reason he did that is because the film company would not give him final cut on his movies. So he said, "Okay, I'll show you." And so he shot these one scenes that were the entire length of the roll. So there was no editing in it. All you had to do was piece the rolls together. You could remove a roll, I guess, or shorten a roll, but you couldn't edit within it because he didn't give you that. And so the camera it moves all around, it follows people all around, and it goes back to a two shot, and it goes in for a close up shot, and then back out here to me. So that's how he got around the the studios telling him that he would have no final cut of his films. But in this, so you have that perspective as to why you'd want to shoot long takes. In this one, it is the idea that can I do it? And then the other thing is that I think you touched on this earlier is that when you don't have any cuts, it has a tendency to keep the audience engaged because they can't take their eyes off of it because there's no, oh, let's cut to the establishing shot and then we're into a new scene, that type of thing. Instead, your eyes are glued to it because that camera just continues to go. And if you look away, you're gonna miss something, if that makes sense. So I think
Hmm.
it can make a more dramatic or more exciting aspect, improve that to the film itself, along with the other things that you're mentioning that a filmmaker might want to just try and challenge themselves.
When you phrase it like that, it gives a lot of credence to what Walter Murch said a cut was, right? He said a cut
Mhm.
works because we blink our eyes, remember?
Right.
It gives credence to that because if you're doing a oneer, you can't blink.
That's true. That's a good point. Right. Well, he references Spielberg. I don't know if have you watched Jaws recently?
Jaws, it's been a minute since I've seen Jaws,
Yeah.
but I mean, I've seen it enough times where I can remember it pretty well.
Sure. I was surprised how long those takes were in Jaws, especially when there's discussions about capturing the shark or killing the shark he does lots of moving around, like when they're on the ferry with the cars,
Hmm.
all these really long one takes. I really didn't notice it, when I saw it years ago. Um, and Spielberg loves that sort of thing. But I was thinking that maybe it was because he grew up in an era where filmmakers were really exploring that. There's a director named Alexander McKendrick, and he made, I want to say, maybe half a dozen movies or something like that. And if you look at a movie, he made one called The Sweet Smell of Success, and he does lots of these moves And these movies came out in, like, I guess 57 is when this one came out. And um, I imagine that Spielberg was informed or studied these movies when he was growing up, and that's probably why he liked to have these long takes also. Um, because it was such an interesting way of doing things, where the cut was. It's sort of interesting when you look at the evolution. It used to be that we'd have one shot was an entire scene. You look at Trip to the Moon, that old silent film, right? Méliès, I think it was, and
Hmm.
then you had D.W. Griffith come along and say, "Hey, why don't we introduce the close-up and we can cut from the master shot to a close-up shot, and the audiences will go along with it." Okay, so then they started doing a lot of editing, and then the backlash to that was, "Hey, let's see if we can't do it as a long take." So you have these, filmmakers are always trying to challenge themselves and find new ways to express themselves in the medium. And so at this time in the 50s, one of the things to try and play around with were these long takes. And he did a lot of these also. And I think Spielberg grew up with those and was probably influenced by them, which is why he incorporated them. And he does them like they did them, which is, on a dolly, you had a master shot, maybe pushed into like a medium shot. When he does it now, he does it with a lot more energy, a lot more fluidity. And, because we now have the tools. You didn't have steady cams back in those days. And now you know, um, you have all these, different gimbal systems you can use, etc. And so becomes much more interesting. I was looking at one comment about Spielberg and in the movie War of the Worlds. Did you see that one with Tom Cruise in
Hmm.
it? And there's
I
the
did.
scene where he's in the truck with his son and his daughter, and they're driving to try and get out of town, and the camera moves all around, goes inside the car, and then comes back out, and he does it. Um, it's all done on a sound stage with green screens and such and things like that. But you could not do a shot like that 30 years ago or 20 years ago, when Spielberg was still doing the oneers. But you can see that he still has that passion for the oneers and incorporates it using the new technology that's available today. So anyway, that brings us back to this guy doing the oneer here, and how it's kind of interesting how filmmakers do this, to not just add energy to it, but also to sort of challenge themselves.
Another thing I think about the Warner in horror movies, you made a comment about keeping our attention span, right? Everything's got to be like Instagram's 10, 15 seconds, TikTok 10, 15 seconds, a minute, right? We're used to things coming at us so quickly. I think another reason why this Warner suits this too is the longer the take, I feel like it stresses a modern audience out a little bit more than maybe a previous audience did. They were
Sure.
more used to cuts, right? Like
Hmm.
cutting to the point. Like you look at Psycho, right? Psycho uses a barrage of cuts to extend the scene, right? Whereas in this, we're looking at somebody who's using one single take to lengthen the thrills and horror for this actress or this character. And I think
Yeah.
we're seeing a lot more of that, whereas like Conjuring and what James Wan's doing, holding just that minute, that 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 frame or two longer just to get you wanting or begging for that release. If I had to say, probably the only moment that took me out of the movie, but when he puts the knife around her neck and she's able to stop it by putting his hand in the door
In
to
a
the
cabinet,
garbage.
right? Hmm.
And that was the only thing in the movie to me that looked like it was rehearsed. Like it looked like a movie right there to me. If that, I don't know if you felt the same thing. Like I couldn't see like how she was able to stop him or why he didn't just finish the job, right?
So all the rest you accept it, but that
Yeah, that was the only moment that I just
what
where I noticed it in my.
I know what you're saying is that it violated what you're watching there. It's like, wait a minute, I'm willing to go along with you so far, but at this point, this doesn't make sense to me. So it pulled you out of the film, is what
Yeah,
happened.
because like it was a moment because she was able to look up at him. I mean,
Hmm.
like and see, and what's funny about it is that's the risk of the Warner, right?
Yeah.
That would probably have been a moment if it would have been editing, you could have cut to the reaction shot of the killer, back
Right.
to her. tightened it and it would
Hmm.
have been faster.
Could have had a shot inside the cabinet, showing his hand, holding that knife,
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff. Yeah, exactly. So you really can work around that kind of stuff. Yep.
Now that's not to say, I mean, if he does in fact see this interview one or this show one day, I love the movie.
Hmm.
Absolutely loved it. It's just that was the only moment for me, like when I saw it. I would love to ask him about that moment. Like, like what was going on there, if he would want to do that differently. Because it did. It looked like where they were, you almost could see it in the actor's face, like, okay, I gotta, like she was working through what she needed to do to get the knife out of his hand. You know what I mean?
Right. Right.
It wasn't like in the moment, it was okay, here, here, here.
Right.
I mean, but that's just to me.
Yeah. I guess the points that I found a little confusing is she's had this encounter before where her throat gets cut, and now she's made the list of tropes to do it. So we're actually seeing her figuring this out, but she has planned, right? We
Mhm.
know she's planned because she has why why hasn't she planned a means to defend herself? Why isn't there a knife by the couch? Why isn't there, why does she have to go and try and find a weapon? She's consciously making an effort to bring this killer into her house because she's seducing the boy. She's drinking the alcohol. She's smoking the pot. And then when he does show up, she has no means to fight her to fight back. Why? Where is the knife? Where's the gun? All that stuff that instead she has to go to the kitchen and grab it. So that kind of threw me for a loop right there. But
And you know what's funny? It took me probably four watches before I realized, she's not really a nice person.
yeah,
Like
sacrifice the boy.
I was with her and I felt for her. But then I realized, in the fourth viewing, I was like, this guy's sitting here saying, like, well, uh, you've never noticed me before. Well, she noticed you when you became bait, sir.
Yeah, exactly,
Like, I
exactly.
mean,
She
that
sacrificed
poor
him.
guy. I mean, this guy thought he was having he finally got lucky.
Hmm.
He didn't get lucky.
Yeah.
He was getting
And what's
offered up to Leonard
and
Nimoy.
she's already has she's already written out that she's gonna try it again, right? I mean, the page two
Hmm.
is already designed, all right? So, so she's on page one, and the body gets dragged out of the house by the killer, and she flips over to page two. What is she gonna do differently than this time? I mean, she removed his head, and he's still
Yeah,
alive. What what more can she do to try and survive this thing? It seems like the only thing she can do is just hang around her parents because the killer disappears when her parents are there.
I like that moment, by the way, how the killer left. I like that. But like it really nodded to like none of this stuff ever happens to around parents in these slasher movies, right?
Yeah,
And then
exactly.
it's like the killer's like, okay, time out, mom's home.
But we have to remember again, these a lot of these slasher movies, especially these, are catering towards teenagers.
Mhm.
So you want to put a your audience in the shoes of what your protagonists are doing in these films.
But yeah, I mean, I thought that was a nice, that was fun. She was like flops the guy. She goes sits on the couch and she just pushes him off.
That's true. He's
That
just
was great.
collateral damage.
If I had to theorize, I think we saw everything in the short. In other words, if this was a feature-length movie, it wouldn't escalate as much as it did in the first one. She might stab the killer and he gets away or something like that. If I were to guess, this particular short put all the brutality that would more than likely come toward the end of a feature-length movie. Because, like you said, like where do you escalate from here? Like I mean, she butchers him. I mean, she like she said decapitates him, but he just regenerates. So obviously, killing this thing would have to be something that's not physical, right? I'm gonna need an exorcist to beat this thing.
She has some research ahead of her, correct? Yeah.
Yeah. But I would be willing to bet that this is, although this is the beginning of the movie, probably in his mind, I would be willing to bet the violence would be paced out a little bit more in a feature length movie. At
Yeah.
least, At least at a guess. He would have to
We
answer
need
that. I mean, that's just me.
needs some more victims and up that body count and all that kind of good stuff. Yeah.
One thing about this idea, it does lends itself to if he would continue with it, there would be a excessive body count in a movie like this. Because like I mean, I
Hmm.
can only imagine the character would eventually just throw a party. He just sacrifice everybody.
Right. Paul, there's one thing I kind of want to go back to. You can choose to leave this in or not. What he says in the interview again is very serious. You know, this woman's been traumatized. These are her coping mechanisms, and the message is about trying to deal with trauma and trying to overcome it. And then we watch this movie, and it's comical. It has fun. It makes fun of the genre. It makes fun of um, previous movies like this. The whole thing is a kite. And did he effectively convey his message with this movie?
No, I don't think. No, honestly, I don't think it does land the the trauma. Not for me, it didn't. But the reason I don't think it lands is because the director does such a good job with the tropes. It's kind of hard to find it under all the stuff that I like. You know, it's doing a really great job of, first of all, it's got this great one shot, right? That you can't take your eyes off of. The actress does a really good job. There's this thrilling one-on-one between the killer and the actress. That works. And then I also think you're really just focused on the rules. You know, he's telling you these are the rules. She's breaking these rules, right? Because you see the little notepad, she's breaking them. So you're more focused on that and how it's going against horror cliches. It really doesn't give you a chance to focus on her trauma. You know, it shows that close up, that nice close up of the slit on her neck, and it gives us the title of the movie. But all I think I really got from that was met before, and this is the rematch. You see what I'm saying? So maybe not. Here's another point. You know, there's been many instances where you do something in a movie and you have to make this part so you can finish the rest of the movie, right? You
Sure.
know, like an intro to the movie. I need this intro, but everybody sees it. You cut the intro off and nobody ever sees it. But the filmmaker needed to put that intro together so that he could finish their movie or she could finish that movie. It served its purpose by allowing the filmmaker to finish it. Maybe that's what he needed to make this movie. That subtext, he created this, but maybe it detaches itself from his intentional meaning.
Could be. Could be.
You know, just I guess moving on, it seems like he's definitely focused on producing. I was looking at his IMDb, you know, he's helped produce Shelby Oaks, which was directed by the YouTube critic Chris Stuckman. That's a pretty
Hmm.
big release that's coming out very soon.
Great.
If you look at some of the comments made on YouTube about this movie, somebody by the name of Def Gear said this was 100 times better than Halloween Ends. Mike Glide 1292. If there was an Academy Award given out for clever and funny, you guys nailed it. And finally, this is my favorite comment. She drank like a horse at a watering hole. You got to know something is up, my boy. But you know, if you go to his website, one of the things about this movie, I think this guy nailed promoting this movie. He got a lot of traction, a lot of mileage out of this movie. I mean, 200 festivals, 60 award wins. It was Oscar qualified. I mean, that's incredible. I mean, what more can you say? It's just incredible.
Yeah, he's clearly talented, and it'd be nice to see more stuff from him.
Is this movie going to be on the list? You know, I mean, I definitely think we will be talking about it. I mean, I think it'll be it'll definitely be in the running. You know, we'll definitely like weigh it against the other movies. Um, the fact that it's a one-off definitely merits that it could be on the list. I will say that.
Okay, that was great. We really enjoyed this film, had a good time watching it and discussing it. And next time, we're going to come back with the short Portrait of God. Looking forward to seeing that one.
All right, for 100 Scariest, that's Hamp Overton. I'm Paul Calinato. See you next time. If you have a movie you want us to check out, comment below. Until then, like, subscribe, and share. See you next time.